Melbourne Football Club Grand Final Breakfast. It's time now for our special guest, and the Grand Final Breakfast has produced many notable guests over its 25 years in operation, and this year one of Australia's foremost historians, author of more than 20 books, and this year notably a game of our own, a history of Australian football. Our special guest this year is Professor Geoffrey Blainey.
Rifle shooting so they could defend their country in an emergency, or play football. All his friends said, let's play football. It was Wills who was one of the two umpires of the first Australian game of which we have record. The other umpire was a man with long red hair, Dr. McAdam, after whom the macadamia nut is named. The Prime Minister implied in his entertaining speech that to most Australian rules supporters there's been deemed a long connection between umpires and nuts. The game was strongly shaped by early Melbourne, by Gold Rush Melbourne. The game began in the parklands, Yarra Park, Royal Park, Faulkner Park and Albert Park. Of all the football codes in the world, this game requires more space than any other. It's therefore unlikely to take root in Hong Kong. The game was influenced by the first winter, one of the driest winters on record in Melbourne, and that was one of the reasons why right from the start it was decided that a rugby-type game was not suited to the Australian grounds. Very early, large crowds came to see the football in Melbourne. In 1880, when the FA Cup final in England was attended by 7,000 people, it was common in Melbourne for matches to be attended by 20,000 and even 30,000. The early football was played not on the cricket ground, but on the park outside between the Melbourne Cricket Ground and the present Jolimont Railway Station. Even in those days, there were ardent greens, and on the football ground, close to one goal, was a clump of old, large red gums, which remained there in position for the first 15 years of Australian rules football. Imagine being a full-back and suddenly seeing Peter Dacos emerge from behind a tree with a football in one hand and the branch of the tree in the other. When the final of the World Cup was staged in Rome this year, the two finalists were traditional football nations, Argentina and Germany. And yet the oldest football team in Argentina is not as old as Essendon. Likewise, several of our younger clubs, Fitzroy and Footscray, are older than the very first football team in Germany, the Dresden Football Club. North Melbourne is older than any football club in Ireland. Carlton is older than any football club in Italy, the oldest being Genoa. Even in England, the fatherland of soccer, the English Football League has no club in any of the four divisions as old as Melbourne and Geelong. So Grand Final Day in Melbourne is the annual climax of something unusual in sporting history. I'm pretty safe in saying that there is no senior football competition in the world as old as senior football in Victoria. Remarkably, the grand final is being played in the same park where the Australian Code of Football was born. If this afternoon you walk through the Yarra Park to the football, you can see trees which were there in the gold rushes of the 1850s when the pioneer footballers played about them. What an astonishing continuity in a nation which is sometimes said to have little history. There's no football field in the world where the past and the present so mingle. This afternoon, countless old players and spectators will surely be there in spirit, hidden in the crowd. Tom Wills will be there, silent in the crowd. And if big hands stretch up in the packed crowd behind the goalposts and try to mark the ball, perhaps that is old Dick Lee, or John Coleman, or Lindsay White, or even Kazali. And if you're in the front row this afternoon and an old man just behind hands you a $100 note to pass over to a Collingwood player who has just kicked a goal, don't forget to say, "Thank you, Mr. Wren." Even the footballers who died in the wars will be there in spirit, just for the day. Perhaps Ron Brassey's dad, along with a host of the nation's forgotten heroes, will be there for the day. The men who founded this game, who made the early rules, thought that football was more than a game. They believed football had something special to offer a young nation. This is still true. As a state, as a nation, we are in economic trouble. And the main cause of those troubles is simple. In economic life, we are not competitive enough. In our export markets overseas, in our markets here, we are too easily defeated by other nations. On this day of days, every footballer will run his heart out. Both teams will give everything they possess. Aren't they giving us a hint, indeed a lesson? Surely they're reminding us that with more effort, with more skill, Australia can ultimately triumph over its economic troubles. So long live our game, long live Australia.
Thank you, Professor Blainey. The acclamation of the audience